Today's case has sparked a lot of debate on whether or not it could have been prevented. But before we get started, welcome to True Crime with Maneater. If you love all things true crime, including missing person cases, cold cases, and just the strange happenings of the world, you've come to the right place. Be sure to subscribe and turn on alerts so you never miss a video upload. Let's get started. DiNardo family appeared to have it all. Tony and Sandra DiNardo had founded their own concrete and construction company, and they were doing very well with it. They had been wildly successful in this venture. They had built at least 8 homes in the suburban development that they lived, including their own home. They had a 4-bedroom, 3-bath home with a ginormous swimming pool out back, and they had been responsible for building at least 30 suburban homes around the area. They also built a dialysis clinic and a short-term residence for adolescents in the Philadelphia area. They had children, their oldest being their son, who they named Cosmo. And those who knew Cosmo DiNardo knew that he had a really promising future. His father, Tony, had even stated that his son, Cosmo, was going to be the mayor of their town one day. His father also went on to say that he was going places and that everybody really loved Cosmo. He was just that great of a kid. He was a straight-A student, and he also helped and worked in the family business, and his parents said he was very dependable. They could always count on Cosmo to be out there helping them. While he was a senior in high school, he was also appointed to a drug and alcohol task force. Obviously, their job was to explain the harms of drugs and alcohol to youth, and he also received an award for helping rebuild a church. He would later graduate high school with a scholarship to attend Arcadia University, and he really had dreams of being an orthodontist. So in 2005, Tony and Sandra decided to purchase a farm in New Hope, Pennsylvania, and this was only about 20 miles away from their home. The farm was going to be used as a vacation spot. It had lots of land so they could ride their ATVs, they could go shoot their guns, they could go hunting, and it was kind of the dream of Tony and Sandra to have this land for their entire family to use for recreational purposes. They kind of looked at it as something they could pass down, and it really did appear that the DiNardo family had it all. They had a successful business that was going really well. They just purchased another house for recreational use. They had a son who was really good looking, outgoing, he was active in the community, he was incredibly intelligent, he was going to college. They really felt like they had gotten to a great place in their lives and they could start enjoying it. Unfortunately, that began to change in 2015. Cosmo DiNardo and his girlfriend had actually broken up, and his plan to become a Navy SEAL had apparently fallen through. And then in February of 2016, he was diagnosed with a major depressive disorder, and eventually he would drop out of college. And then in May of that year, Cosmo was actually in a pretty bad ATV accident on the farm. He had gotten in an accident, and the ATV actually was on top of him, so he was pinned under that ATV for hours. When he was found and taken to the emergency room, he had numerous head injuries, but he also had compound leg fractures, and he had to wear a cast that ran from his toe all the way to his hip, which meant he had to be in a wheelchair. Cosmo's mother, Sandra, would go on to say that after that incident, his behavior became very erratic and increasingly bizarre. At one point, he stopped eating his mother's cooking because he firmly believed that she was trying to poison him, and Sandra really didn't know what to do. This wasn't Cosmo. He wasn't this person who accused her of trying to poison him. And Cosmo would actually become increasingly obsessed with religion around this time. He would attend mass with his mother, and he always wore a cross around his neck. He would begin to decorate his room with crucifixes and statues of saints and things like that. He would take his Bible everywhere, and he would even fall asleep reading it. He would actually lay it on his chest and leave it there as he slept to ward off evil. Cosmo would actually tell his mother eventually that he was hearing voices telling him to do evil things, and that his spirit was under attack. And Sandra, who really didn't know what to do at this point, actually contacted her church and asked her priest to come to her house and cleanse it. So the priest actually did come, and he felt that there was something evil in the house, and this made him very uneasy. So he's going through the house and he's throwing some holy water and he's reciting some verses, and they make it upstairs and walk into Tony and Sandra's room, and had such a volatile reaction to whatever presence he said was in the house that he ran outside and threw up in the yard. Around this time, Cosmo would actually get physically aggressive with his family members. So he was eventually prescribed an antidepressant to help his moods, but unfortunately a side effect of this particular antidepressant was weight gain, and Cosmo would go on to gain 100 pounds rather quickly, and that just made his depression even worse. His mom said that he was always very in shape. He was never really above 160 pounds, but even then he very much cared about the way he looked, so he toned, he went to the gym, him and things like that. In July of 2016, Sandra was taking Cosmo to the hospital to have him voluntarily committed. She really wanted Cosmo to get extra help because these outbursts had gotten more violent. He was more aggressive. And I'm sure she was very worried not only about her son, but for her family's safety. And as they're driving, her and Cosmo get into this argument, and Cosmo grew so enraged that he bit his mother's arm as hard as he could, and then he punched her in the eye. And as they're sitting in traffic, he opens the door, and he's on crutches at this point because remember, he was in an ATV accident, and he gets out of the car, and he's weaving in and out of the traffic as he's like limping, and he tries to get in a woman's car. He was saying that he was kidnapped and that he just escaped to let him in, to drive him out of there. He was eventually apprehended by the police and wound up in the mental hospital. And after that incident, he would be in and out of these hospitals quite a bit. And Cosmo's parents, Tony and Sandra, just became so upset about this. I mean, they didn't know their son anymore. They had this completely normal role model of a son for so many years, and now he's violent and he's attacking them and he's having hallucinations and things like that, and they don't know what to do. But Sandra is desperate to get her son help. She's taking him to psychiatrists. She's taking him to these mental health hospitals to try to get him the help that he desperately needs. So medical records at this time would paint a really disturbing picture of Cosmo's mental health throughout these incidents. One record noted that Cosmo thought his mother was a Russian spy and that his cast, the one that was from his toe to his hip, the actual cast was bugged so that people could listen to him and know what he was doing at all times. One psychiatrist noted that he was probably suffering with paranoid schizophrenia, and one noted that Sandra was very overwhelmed by her son and obviously his mental health state, but that both parents, Tony and Sandra, remained very supportive of Cosmo, that they really wanted to get him help. They were desperate. And in July of 2016, these records also noted that Cosmo kept going on and off his meds and that his hallucinations were getting progressively worse and that his overall mental state was deteriorating rapidly. He was hearing voices, he was having hallucinations and suffering from delusions. And I kind of want to note here that it's not uncommon for people that suffer with mental health issues to go on and off medication, because when a medication starts to work, a lot of times people feel like that they're better and that their symptoms are gone. And then they get off the medication and those symptoms flare up again. And then they realize, okay, it was the medication that was helping me. So it's not uncommon, and a lot of doctors will tell you right away that you can't just go on and off of these because it's controlling the symptoms. It's making you so you do feel better, but if you go off of that, you're not going to feel good anymore. And Cosmo is going on and off them so rapidly that one minute his symptoms would be pretty much under control, and then the next they wouldn't be, and he's having these delusions and he's getting really upset and physically violent, and obviously terrible things are happening. And so of course, when a medication is controlling symptoms and helping you feel better, you're not going to think you need it. And Cosmo's private psychologist actually noted that Cosmo's situation was dire. He noted that Cosmo was making, quote, vile sexual comments about his mother, Sandra, and that he was telling stories about selling drugs and cutting off people's heads with a chainsaw and feeding it to an alligator. And the doctor said that it was really hard to tell if Cosmo actually believed these things or if he was very much manic and delusional. Eventually, Cosmo would begin to take his rage out on Tony, his father. He was really enraged when he found out that his father was having an affair, and he even took a baseball bat and beat that woman's car. In November of 2016, a psychiatrist noted that Cosmo took an AR-15 and, quote, hunted his father, but eventually decided to not kill him. And one would think that because Cosmo was displaying such incredibly violent tendencies, that they would take away all access to guns. And if his other warning signs weren't enough, the fact that he literally tried to hunt his own father to kill him probably should have been the one warning sign they took very seriously. And by this point, Cosmo had proven that he was very unpredictable and that he was violent. And that December, he would attack Tony, his father, while Tony is driving, and he viciously beat up his father. And then Cosmo turned to Sandra to attack her. By this point, obviously they're out of the car, and Cosmo takes his rage and he turns it on Sandra, and he's obviously chasing after her and trying to hurt her, and Tony picks up a brick and he knocks Cosmo in the head with it. And then they run away from their son, and fortunately police are called because neighbors see Tony and Sandra running away from Cosmo and they look terrified. And obviously right after this, he was institutionalized hospitalized again. And it's important to note that when he was hospitalized for these 3 weeks, he was very homicidal, he was suicidal, he continuously threatened to harm the staff. He even told a doctor that if he had a gun, he would kill everybody. So obviously his conditioning is worsening, and people are seeing this. Doctors, psychiatrists, these mental health hospitals, they're all noting the same behavior that Cosmo is displaying. Eventually, Cosmo was released, and during a visit to a psychiatrist, his mother Sandra always went with him. He actually grew very violent. He started punching and kicking Sandra. He wouldn't stop cursing. He punched the elevator. He kept hitting on the female receptionist, and there was a glass between him and the receptionist, and he took his tongue and he ran it down the glass. The psychiatrist told Sandra that if Cosmo didn't get it together and he didn't calm himself down, he had to leave. And at this point, I'm sure the psychiatrist is not only fearing for his safety, but his staff's safety. Cosmo's being visibly aggressive, and he's cursing and he's hitting elevators. And Sandra told the doctor, I'm not leaving here. If I leave with him, he is going to kill me. You have to do something. So Sandra sat at his desk and refused to move. She said, I'm not going anywhere until you help me. I can't leave with him. He will kill me. And so the doctor gave Cosmo new medication, and the next day, I guess he woke up really peaceful, and he was very nice and kind like he had been before all of this happened. And in a sense, I really do feel for Sandra and Tony, because it seems like they were doing everything in their power to help Cosmo. And they took him to at least 10 different psychiatrists and mental health hospitals to get him help. They desperately wanted him to get better. And all through this time, Cosmo is still acting erratically. He's getting in fights. He was spotted loading his shotgun into a Cadillac and was later arrested for it. His behavior was beyond dangerous at this point. And then something completely mind-boggling happened. In March, Cosmo's doctor believed that his symptoms for bipolar were in remission. And he noted that Cosmo was making progress and that Cosmo was taking his medication every other day instead of every single day, and he thought that this was helping. In June, he would actually say that Cosmo's bipolar was in full remission, meaning he no longer had any symptoms and everything was fine. And the doctor actually even encouraged Cosmo's parents to give him space and to let him start living his life and having fun and doing things again. But unfortunately, by this time, the people that were once in Cosmo's life really didn't want anything to do with him, and it's hard to blame him because he was so violent. And that's when Sean Kratz would enter into Cosmo's life. Cosmo's father, Tony, and Sean's mother, Vanessa, were first cousins. And Vanessa actually reached out to Sandra and asked if Sean could maybe start spending time with Cosmo, because Sean also didn't have friends and he needed somebody to spend time with. And Sandra, hearing this, was like, yes, Cosmo also needs friends. He doesn't have any friends. He's really sad about it. He needs somebody to hopefully spend time with him and help him stay on the right track. What Sandra didn't know is that Sean had been in some serious trouble. He was investigated for an attempted murder in Philadelphia, which was a shooting that left a man in a wheelchair. And Sean also walked with a limp because he was recovering from an unsolved drive-by attack where he was shot 19 times. Sean had also been involuntarily committed by his mother to a mental health hospital. In September of 2016, Sean flashed a gun at his 9-year-old brother and threatened to blow his brains out. He also threatened to kill his sister as well. But again, Sandra did not know any of this information prior to letting Cosmo and Sean hang out. And really, she was very hopeful that those two would do good for each other. In a text exchange between Sandra and Vanessa, Sandra said, I just feel how his whole life has changed from hitting his head and no one catching it. It breaks my heart and people are so mean. No one wants to hang out with him, at least no one good. Vanessa would reply, that's so sad. It really is. Hopefully he gets better over time. Him and Sean would be good together in that sense. Neither one knows anybody worth anything. They should stick together and stay away from trash. True, Sandra replied back. We just need to make sure they don't get in trouble together because Cosmo has no more sense of fear or what's right or wrong. So instantly Sandra tells Vanessa that Cosmo has no fear, he doesn't know the difference between right and wrong, and that obviously we have to watch these two because we don't want them getting in trouble together. On July 6, 2017, Cosmo and Sandra were actually on their way to an appointment with his psychiatrist. While waiting for his appointment, Cosmo actually took his iPad and he was Googling the Soup Maker Cartel. And for those of you who don't know the reference, the Soup Maker Cartel is a Mexican drug organization known for making soup out of 300 murder victims. And they did this by dissolving their bodies in barrels of acid. And the reference comes from the fact that they would have to stir it, supposedly, every so often to make sure everything was dissolving. Obviously, that's very disturbing and very graphic. And what neither Sandra or Cosmo psychiatrist knew is that the day before his appointment, Cosmo offered to sell 19-year-old Jimmy Patrick $8,000 worth of weed. Cosmo would actually bring Jimmy to the farm in New Hope that his parents had purchased and then shot Jimmy with a .22 rifle. He would then dig a grave with his backhoe and bury the body. The next day, on July 7th, after he went to his appointment with his mother, he would go and meet Sean, his cousin, on the family farm. And just like he did with Jimmy, he lured 2 more men to the farm under the pretense of selling them marijuana. Except instead of just 2 men coming, they actually brought a friend along with them. 19-year-old Dean Fitticore, 21-year-old Tom Mio, and their friend 22-year-old Mark Sturgis all arrived at the farm. What they didn't know was Sean and Cosmo were waiting there to ambush them. Cosmo and Sean would then proceed to pull out guns and shoot at the men, killing 2 of them instantly. And he had actually stolen his mother's handgun to do so. By this point, the parents had already locked up the guns and they thought they hid him properly. What they didn't know is that day, Sean and Cosmo went to the family home. Sean would distract Sandra and Cosmo would go steal the gun. But when Cosmo ran out of ammo after shooting at the men, he would jump on his backhoe and run over Tom, who was still alive. And Tom was screaming out in agony. So he crushed him to death, and then he would pour gasoline over the bodies and light them on fire in an oil tank that had been converted to be a pig roaster. Then him and Sean went out and got some dinner. They had some cheesesteaks and went home, and then they told Sandra, we've been riding ATVs all day and it was a great time. Cosmo went up to his room and didn't come out the rest of the night. Sean stayed overnight in a guest room. Sandra would actually text Sean's mom, Vanessa, and say, well, they sounded like they were having fun. Vanessa responded with, I hope they both use their positives to cancel out the negatives, LOL. I'm sure you do too, and I think they will. Sandra replied, and thank you. Cosmo really needed a friend. So obviously 4 young men go missing and police start to search for these 4 men. And when they pulled up phone records, Dean's phone was actually pinging off a tower near the family farm in New Hope. So although Cosmo thought he was this brilliant mastermind, they actually left Dean's phone on and at the farm, and police just traced it right to their door. They would also find Tom's abandoned car parked at a neighboring residence, and so police come in, the FBI comes in, tons of volunteers come, and they start searching the DiNardo property. Of course, the FBI is there, they bring in cadaver dogs, they have helicopters flying over the property, and Sandra and Tony are asking Cosmo, why are the police here? What is happening? And he just kept telling his parents, I have no idea what's happening. And I'm sure in the back of their mind, they're actually terrified that something deeply wrong has happened. And after several days, police actually uncovered a grave for the 3 men he killed. Police arrested Cosmo, but Tony and Sandra just couldn't wrap their heads around it. They didn't believe their son did it until Cosmo actually confessed to the crime. And during the taped confession, Cosmo actually went on to tell police that he killed Jimmy Patrick, his first victim, the 19-year-old, because he noticed that Jimmy was carrying a Glock and it was in self-defense. He told police, I knew he was going to whack me, so I had to whack him first with the .22 rifle. And then he said, quote, put 2 in the back of his head. And that .22 rifle was apparently stolen a year or 2 earlier from a home in North Carolina. And police have no idea how he got his hands on this rifle, and Sandra and Tony have no idea how he got his hands on this rifle. Cosmo would then go on to tell police that Sean actually shot Dean in the back of the head with Sandra's gun a few times, and that he continued to do it even after Dean was dead, and that Cosmo, quote, finished the job and shot him 1 or 2 more times. He also said, quote, his head was split the hell open. Half his brain was in the barn. Cosmo actually shot Tom, but he shot him in the spine, which paralyzed him. And Mark, the 4th and last victim who was trying to run away, was shot and died. And that's when he ran out of ammunition. But Tom was still screaming that he couldn't feel his legs. He said, I can't feel my legs, I can't feel my legs. He's screaming at this point. And Cosmo is out of ammo. So he casually tells the cops that he jumped on his backhoe and ran the man over. Cosmo was quoted as saying he was dead instantly. Cosmo would then use the backhoe to pick up the bodies and put them in that converted pig roaster before lighting them on fire. And while they were still on fire, they went out and had some dinner. They grabbed some cheesesteaks. And Cosmo told the cops that he didn't eat his. He said, I just did something so gruesome. I didn't have the appetite. And then he said, obviously they went home, they talked to Sandra, they went to bed, and then the next day they returned to the farm to bury the bodies. It's also noted that during the confession, Cosmo was off his medications, he was giggling, he was very chatty, and then eventually he just broke down and cried. He said, I don't know why I did this shit, man. man. I threw my life away for nothing. My life is done for nothing. And when his confession was over, Cosmo said, I am just a happy-go-lucky guy. This is why it's so fucked up. And his defense attorney was trying to comfort him at this point, and his defense attorney said, 90% of Cos is a fun-loving, good son, and you've got this dark side that fucking eats you up and you kill people. In May of 2018, Cosmo pled guilty to 4 counts of first-degree murder. There was also conspiracy charges, there was robbery charges, abuse of a corpse charges, and in order to escape the death penalty, he agreed to show police where the body of Jimmy was. That was his first victim. He had actually buried him a bit further away from the rest of the bodies. And obviously, the judge sentenced him to life, and after sentencing, he told Cosmo that Cosmo had shown him during his confession that human lives were disposable to him, that they had no value. A separate jury would obviously find Sean Kratz guilty of first-degree murder. In one death and voluntary manslaughter, he was actually sentenced 8 to 36 years. What's even more tragic about this is that night on the farm, it is believed that Cosmo would have killed another victim. Earlier that evening, his father, Tony, had actually come to the farm, and when he realized Cosmo was there, he quickly turned around and left. And that's because he was with his mistress. And obviously, he didn't want Cosmo to see them together because Cosmo had attacked that woman's car, and he had been in fights with his dad over this. He was very hostile and very aggressive towards his dad because of this situation. Cosmo actually called his dad 3 times that night, and when he finally picked up, Cosmo was asking if his dad was with this woman. Tony said yes, he was, and Cosmo said, come back to the farm and come alone. And obviously, Tony did not do that. He followed his better judgment. He didn't go back to the farm, and I firmly believe that if he had gone to the farm that night, Cosmo would have killed him. He had already killed 4 people, and it is no doubt in my mind that he would have killed Tony. What's even more interesting about this case is Thomas Klebold actually reached out to Sandra. And if you don't know who Thomas is, he's the father of Dylan Klebold. And Dylan and another boy named Eric Harris killed 13 people and wounded 21 others during the Columbine school shooting in 1999. And of course, Sandra was appreciative of him calling and offering help and things like that, but she was also in distress about this. She said, my son wasn't this horrible animal that everybody says he was. He lost his life a year before those kids. He's a prisoner in his own brain. He's lost forever. And I do want to note that everybody has kind of targeted Tony and Sandra, saying they should have done more to help their son, and that they basically gave him a place, a farm, to commit these violent crimes. They allowed him guns, they allowed him backhoes and things like that. But Sandra and Tony were very supportive of their son. They did everything in their power to keep getting him help. They did different psychiatrists and psychologists. They did mental health places. They even had a priest come in to make sure there was no demons in there so that Cosmo could sleep better and feel better. It's important to note that in junior high, Cosmo's football career actually ended because of several concussions and a neck injury. He was also in that ATV accident where they said he did have head injuries. He was also in numerous fights at this time, and of course, he was hit in the back of the head with a brick. It is possible that all of these injuries, especially at such a young age, could have changed his brain. It could have made him violent. Of course, we would need doctors to be examining his brain and things like that to actually know, but it is a possibility, and Sandra firmly believes that that was overlooked, that was missed. And I do feel for Tony and Sandra. People are attacking them. They feel like Tony and Sandra raised a monster and that they enabled him. I'm not sure that I believe that. I feel like they did a lot to try to get him help, and there's only so much they could do. He was an adult. They can't force pills down his throat. They can remind him to take them. They can take him to appointments. They can do all of that stuff, but they can't physically force it down his throat. I mean, what else were they supposed to do? Psychiatrists knew about Cosmo's behaviors. They knew about the things he was saying and the things that he was doing. I mean, he made murderous and homicidal comments. So I don't think it's entirely fair to blame them for something that their son did. As for Cosmo, he apparently hasn't gotten any better while in prison. He does go on and off his meds. He's gotten into fights because he's manic, so he's attacked his roommate. And then he was placed in solitary confinement where he made the mistake of placing something over the glass window so they couldn't see in. Of course, they demanded that he needed to take it down, but he refused. So obviously, correctional officers had to go in that room, in that cell, because he could be harming himself. And when they got into the cell, a fight ensued, and Cosmo would end up very injured. He would end up in the prison hospital, obviously with a concussion, an injured jaw, and a broken nose. And unfortunately, Tony and Sandra are also suffering every single day. Not only did they lose a son, not only do they have to bear the weight of what he did, but now they're being sued by the victims' families. So they're being sued for wrongful deaths of those 4 young men. And not only did they lose Cosmo and they have to bear this, but there are also 4 other families that are devastated and they're struggling to also deal with the outcome of his heinous crimes. And I firmly believe that the system failed not only Cosmo's family, but obviously these other families. That's it for today, guys. If you like this video or any other video on my channel, be sure to subscribe and turn on alerts so you never miss video upload. And if you have a suggestion on a case you'd like to see, be sure to pop it in the comments and I'll do my best to get to every single one. See you next time.